Hello and welcome to this video. Today I'll be showing you how I make an episode of my comic Hues of Solitude. This is episode 22 out of 33. You can check it out on tapas.io if you feel like it. As you can see here, I start by creating a sketch layer. Sometimes I'll make the sketch layer a bit more detailed than I do here, but in this one it's pretty rough. It really depends on what mood I'm in. You can see that sometimes I copy my old sketches and use them as a base for new sketches. I do this to more quickly get the right proportions of everything. In the first panel, for example, I wanted the drawing to be virtually the same as the last panel in the previous comic, or the previous episode. So this makes the process a lot faster than if I had to pretty much draw the same drawing again, but freehanded. This style of drawing is very rigid, and it really just makes the whole process a lot faster for me to do this in certain places. I'll always start on the top of the page and move my way down. I have a very long canvas to make sure I have enough room to work with. I really like working in one big document like this to better get the whole flow of the comic, and as you can see I can easily move items around. I make the comic like this also because it's made purely for web. If you're making a comic for print as well, you would have to have a much larger file size, and you would need to make the canvas a standard page size with some bleed as well. I don't really have to adhere to that, so I can pretty much just go nuts with it, and drawing all the way to the border, making this a very chunky comic that really works well for mobile, I've found. It's good to think about those things when you're posting on a website that also has an app attached to it. So, once I'm done with my sketch layer and I'm satisfied with how everything is placed, I move on to inking the whole thing. This is really the very creative phase for me, and a lot of details really come together here. I'll often start with making the speech bubbles and standard objects like borders and stuff. I ended up dropping the books that I drew here in the background because she wouldn't really have books. It's the future. I thought of making them into screens or something, but I ended up just deciding against it altogether. I like the flow of the smoke in the background a bit more. I'm a little tired of this whole comic in general. I feel like I haven't really had enough time to really work on the visual as much as I wanted to. This specific style of drawing can look really slow. I'ma have a sip of my tea. Did you hear that? This specific style of drawing can look very sloppy very easily, and it really does in some of my other episodes. But, it's all part of growing as an artist, and I've definitely moved artistically by making this comic. I think that if you really want to challenge yourself and getting better at drawing, making a short comic like this is really great. You have to draw a lot of different things, and you have to make it cohesive, and it'll also push you to draw more often if you have a schedule you have to stick to. I know that this is not exactly live drawing or anything, and it's really good practice to do that a lot too, but this project is still pushing me to draw more than I would have otherwise, so it's still nice. Yeah, I'm sorry that I'm bumbling a bit around in my words. I don't really have a chance to practice my English on a daily basis, and on top of that I'm also just really bad at saying words. I mean, I could edit it all out, but I guess it's better to be my authentic self than some totally polished version of myself. This is supposed to reflect my process, and being bad at speaking is part of that, I guess. What do you think? Do you have any comments on that? I mean, probably not, since nobody is watching this video anyways. So I guess I'm free to bumble and stumble as much as I want to, really. I really like drawing hair, as you can probably tell from this whole project. It's just so fluid, and you can fill a space out with it in a lot of different ways. It gives me some good possibilities of using both the positive and negative space on the page. It's the same with the smoke that I draw in a lot of the episodes of this comic. I also like to try out different transitions between panels. If you're a reader of the comic and you haven't noticed, I assigned shape language that are much more rounded and bubbly to Eden's panels, and a more square and straight one to Sage's panels. In this episode, his panels are round, but they're still perfect circles, whereas Eden's are more wild, like the nature season and her own nature. I think the shape language of a comic is a really important part of the comic. It really helps inform the reader of what they should be feeling and what kind of mood you're trying to set. And this is working in concert with the colors that you're using for your comic as well, and we're actually getting to the colors now. So for the coloring, it's really easy because of the line art. Most of it I can just color in with the paint bucket. I start by doing the colors like the skin and Sage's hair because I know what they should look like. If you don't know, Sage is the guy that you see in the top panel and the bottom panel. The girl you see is Eden, and her hair is a little bit more tricky because it changes colors depending on her mood. So I'll usually do that after the skin. I have pretty free range with the colors because she's on an alien planet and her hair can be different colors. It actually has to be. So I usually make her colors pretty bright and saturated. Sage, on the other hand, lives in the city and he's surrounded by a lot of gray and cold colors. I kind of have a color palette for him. But not for Eden, because I have to build the color palette around her mood in each comic. In this one, her colors are pretty much only gray because she's getting a little depressed lately. But a rule of thumb for me is that I'm generally trying to use colors that are easy to distinguish from the line art. So right now we're at one of the last phases of making an episode for this comic. It's the shadows, and for this I'm using a multiply layer that has a low opacity. I am doing cell shading with a blue color, and this really helps distinguish the foreground from the background and give some dimension to the whole comic. Normally I use a red color for Eden's shadows because her colors in general are more warm, and a bluish one for Sage. But in this one, since Eden is a little depressed, I'm using a blue one for her as well. And I also add some glow from all the watches and the screens. There we go. This is the final product, the whole comic, all in all. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this little peek into how I make my comics. You can find the whole comic on tapas.io, Hues of Solitude. Have a good one. Bye!